A couple of weeks ago, I made a guide on how to play this game as Rome and went over a bunch of other useful beginner tips that I essentially compressed from all of my other guides. And today, I want to talk about a different nation, Macedon. How to play Macedon. Although I wouldn't recommend this for any brand new player. This nation is popular for a multitude of reasons. However, it is not a very beginner-friendly nation. It is very easy to mess up, as it gets put in one of the most stressful situations at the very beginning of the game out of any nation on the map. Now, I'm going to show you what this situation is, and I'm going to show you your options for dealing with it. And we'll get it just unpaused here and kind of set things up. If you plan on playing a warlike Macedon early on, you're definitely going to want this discipline buff from the religious pantheon deities early on, that's for sure. And you're going to want to focus a lot on war, because very quickly in the beginning here, you're going to be thrust into quite the crisis. As the new year comes along here, the legacy of Alexander war goal unlocks, and all of Alexander's heirs will be able to fight each other with a special war goal where when you go ahead and say, if I was at war with Thrace with this, and I besieged this city, which doesn't even have a fortress, the moment the bar filled up, it would immediately become mine, instantaneously annexed and unreclaimable in any standard peace treaty negotiation due to this war goal. And then 100% of the time, shortly after that, look at this, we're only a couple months into the game, you will be prompted that the Antigonids, if played by an AI, a player is going to be very likely to pick this as well, but they have decided that they are going to go to war with you unless you give them Corinthos, this one little city right here. And this could be such an easy thing for a newer player to see and think, oh, well, I can take them, especially if you know the history and know that many others would be going to war this day as well. However, the problem is you are the first nation that will be gone to war with, and you are in the worst position. Not only out of all of the main of Alexander's heirs other than Thrace, are you just kind of in the worst position here, but the main antagonist, the main Antigonid of this war is going to have its main legion placed on your, what do you even call this, peninsula? This area right here, the main legion of the Antigonids, is already pre-placed here along with a bunch of naval ships right on your border. You might not think this is your border, but Oreos directly belongs to you. If you go ahead and look at the diplomacy map here, all these little light blue things belong to you. You start out bordering them immediately. And the Antigonids here start out with a truce with Boeotia by default. They can get permission to walk through very easily, or they'll just sail. Look at all their claims that they have. These are claims. This is what claims looks like. It's on all of Macedon. They're not just gonna go for Corinthos, they're gonna go for your whole mainland. And this is a legacy of Alexander war that is proccing. Hell, they'll probably just ignore Corinthos for a while, because look at all of this other stuff that's not fortified and is super easy to take. And what do you have at the start? You start out with 5.5k in Legion. And that's actually really cool. And you can build it up to 37 cohorts. That is insane for such a small nation early on. But that's not a good thing. That is truly insane. So insane, in fact, that you don't have the money to support this. Look at the money it already costs. Imagine tripling this, more than tripling this to get it to max. You can't afford that. Not only that, this is what it looks like just to double the size of it. If we go ahead here and triple it, and this isn't even max, look at this. All the money I built up in that short period of time since the beginning of the game, that's all of it right there, just to get that up to snuff. The maintenance will be well out of reach. Nothing I can do will make this sustainable. And it is nearly 100% of the manpower that I start the game with. And you only get 129 each month. So let's go ahead and say we actually fill all this in. And what do we have to recover in a couple of months here? We have about, what, 300 to 400 manpower to recover. One battle will make it so that we cannot recover this legion for the entire rest of the war. And this is what I see new players do all the time. They take this war because they think it'll be easy, especially if they know already that Thrace, Egypt, and the Seleucids will probably end up in this war as well. And then they go ahead, they beef up this legion thinking legions are amazing. And if you do think that, I suggest you watch my military guide. They are not all they're cracked up to be. They are amazing, but they come with a lot of downsides. And then they end up with no money, no manpower, trying to fight off a power that is way larger than them. Look at this. Like 300 territories compared to only 50. Over 2,000 pops compared to a measly 600. This fight isn't even close. And you're paying for a navy, which is not any match for the Antigonid navy. Either it will get destroyed easily early on. You don't stand a chance. But there is another option here. You can buy time to prepare. You can go ahead and choose to simply give them this territory. Now, what happens if you give them the territory? Well, if you give them Corinthos, then what happens is you'll lose some popularity. They get Corinthos, you'll get a truce for 5 years. Let's go ahead and give it to them so you see. And so you see Corinthos here doesn't belong to me anymore, belongs to the Antigonids. This is the safe thing you would do, but I never see any new player do this. And this avoids the war entirely. Not only does it avoid your war, it avoids everybody going to war with the Antigonids entirely. Now, there is a chance the Antigonids might kind of fall apart later anyway, and you might get some free land as if you had fought them and devastated them in the war with the scripted events that would occur. However, it's also very likely now that they don't fall apart. They stay this massive pain that's right here, and Egypt and the Seleucids especially the Seleucids, don't really get to cannibalize them. If you're a new player and you want something peaceful and easy as Macedon, what I just suggested you do right here, what I just showed you, is definitely what I would suggest you to do if you're learning, because otherwise it's going to take some min-maxing. And I'm going to give you some tips on if you really want to go through with this war, which if you do win it, it can be quite useful to Macedon. It can be quite useful. Then that's great, but we're going to have to go about this a different way. So let's start from the beginning of the timer and see how we can actually get started as Macedon and maybe win this war. We've restarted, and as you see, you start out with some situations. You'll have potentially someone to assign. It is kind of random each time. You'll have some inventions that you can appoint, and like I mentioned, all this, if you do plan on going to war, this discipline bonus will be invaluable to you. The idea slots are going to be very important here at the beginning, and with the aristocratic monarchy, we can only have one military idea. I think for certain, the one that you're going to want the most, especially as Macedon, is going to be the ordered retreat. It will get your army morale recovery up and your reinforcement speed up. Because even if you don't plan on getting your ass beat, you should plan on getting your ass beat. Because again, you'll be fighting the full force of the Antigonids until everybody else gets involved. And even then, the Antigonids aren't just going to move their legion over here and go fight somebody else and just pretend you don't exist. No, they're going to use their legion, they're going to raise any additional levies, and they're going to absolutely beat your ass with their massive array of these client states they have access to. So I would definitely get ordered retreat. For the oratory ideas, we just really need to be able to keep everything together while we're getting started here. So monthly corruption reduction, very important, because you're going to want to be able to deal with any domestic problems instantaneously. You might be tempted to use free hand, something like that. This will help counteract that. And then loyalty of generals and admirals, because when there's a lot of fighting, generals and admirals can get a lot of power, and either way, these are the best things we can really use early on anyway. We start out with a bellicose stance, and whereas you could change it immediately, I would actually suggest maybe you don't want to change it immediately. It could be very useful for money if you go with the mercantile stance, but this can also wait a month or two, because that's going to be the rest of your political influence here, and Like I mentioned, with this Legacy of Alexander war goal, the moment you take something, it's yours, and you immediately will get that aggressive expansion, like, right then. And so having a minus 10% to the impact of aggressive expansion could be useful to you. And I would instead suggest that you go ahead and perform a divine sacrifice as soon as possible. You could probably just put off the military administration loyalty of generals and admirals. You could probably put that off if you want to get this first. That could definitely work, but you should get this pretty early into the war anyway. Just perform that divine sacrifice. I would highly suggest that. Now, as for the military, we still have like no manpower and our money's still very limited. You saw it went up barely at all in that whole time. We're doing a little bit better right now. We can make it even better. Let's never forget some tips I've gone over in my other guides. Always set it to free trade. Free trade. This is going to fuck with your imports at the beginning, but it doesn't matter. Imports not as important as some of this other crap. Now, Macedon seems to start out with a lot of exports coming from its main region. I would suggest you actually probably cancel these while you get your imports in order. You don't have to do this, but at least the ones that are, in your capital region. It'll lose you money temporarily, but if you're accepting all trades after anyway, it'll be fine. Getting to see what you have a surplus of early on here is going to be definitely more valuable to you. So if we go and we look at our imports now, it is going to seem better. We know we don't need to be importing grain. That's just a waste. Wine, we don't need to be importing. That's a waste. We don't need that. Salt and dates are fine, and dates are honestly pretty good for that commerce income. Hell yeah, we definitely want that, especially from Egypt. We're going to be in a war with them soon. Getting some more dates from them could be very handy for increasing our money overall for this war. And don't worry about those exports. If you have it on auto trade, you will rebound. And I always suggest going to every location that is not your capital and turning on automatic trade if you don't plan on taking care of this stuff yourself. Next is the matter of this navy, which actually starts as 2 navy. I just merged them together for simplicity. 16 triremes and 18 librarians. That's nothing to scoff at. That's a pretty nice navy. You can do a couple things with this. You can either just lower its maintenance so that you would have it from 3.81 to 1.99, or you can just flat out delete it entirely to save the money on it, plus the fact that you might be assigning some sort of, let's say, political commander to this, which is going to cost even more money. Either of these ideas will work. The more money you have for land things like mercenaries and just maintaining yourself throughout this war, really, the better. I'm just going to disband it because we don't need it in this demonstration at the very least. As for this legion, I'm also going to suggest just disbanding this legion. It will cost you a little bit of money up front. You'll get some manpower back that you don't really need at the moment. But let me tell you why I suggest doing this. You're gonna have to pay for the legion again later. But if you get rid of this legion, now you can summon levies worth 41 cohorts that will spawn with all of their own support units. You can also raise levies in addition to this, but this puts everybody under 1 leader, and that 1 leader is your leader, and your leader at the start is a pretty darn good marshal. And if I were to raise these levies, instead of that 5.5k, I have 20.5k that only has a maintenance of, this is less than 10%. This is like nothing, man. This is actually like 5% or less the maintenance of what this would have cost in the Legion, while still having over 300 money at the beginning and having tons of manpower to use. And it's a pretty good comp right here that would work very well with who you're playing as. Shock action works fine, but you can also change it to be other things as well. As for how I would personally build this, you generally want something heavy out on the front, and then something that's good at flanking on the sides. Now, we don't really have a lot of light cavalry, so I would personally suggest putting the heavy cav on the sides, because we're gonna put the heavy infantry on the front and the light infantry in the rear here. So you want your heaviest units, they'll be going out on the front, including the ones with more maneuver. If we had more light cavalry, I'd put them on the flanks. You might disagree with this tactic. A flank size of 5, I think, will seem fine with this army setup. And then with all these supply trains, you'll be able to use this as a very effective levy, and we're going to be getting more money as well. Now we have to look at what we want for this. So taking a look at this levy, this is gonna be our main force, and it has a weight of 44. That's pretty problematic. So something I could do to make this better is go into military artisans here on the martial advances, go down to logistical divisions, go down into fighting season, and now I've gotten a supply limit of 15% more. And now I can go even further to another 10%, another 5% supply limit. I could even be going for, say, discipline bonuses as well, which are all over the place. You want to probably go really military heavy with this kind of a start, quite frankly. We have, let's see, 4. If I can go all the way down here to professional training, I can easily get that 5% discipline. In addition to the supply benefits I've gotten, go over here to lower the army weight modifier of our levy and then get even more discipline. And now I've made a rather elite force here whose weight modifier, once everything updates, and overall supply limit is going to be vastly improved. You see, with everything we've done, we've actually boosted our income now a month or so later into the game to 11.51. Now we're talking. Now we can do something against these nasty Antigonids. Now, one thing to note is we might not necessarily still do very well, especially if we're brand new to the game. So this next suggestion will be up to you. I would suggest, if you don't think you can hold anywhere, find places like right here and delete things that don't necessarily need to be there. Like this port, does this need to be there? No, it doesn't. And so we could just delete that port and get the money back for it. Even Corinthos, you might want to think about Corinthos, because you don't really know if you're going to hold Corinthos. You might, especially with this strategy, you might, but if you're uncertain, you can scrap certain things like the tax office and the port so that they don't get anything other than these forts that will be holding them at bay, for example. And even these areas over here that are much closer. And I mean, realistically, you should probably figure out what you want to be your capital over here in Thessaly, don't know how to say this, and get a fort building there as soon as possible. Don't wait a month or two like me, but get that going as soon as possible. Find any irrelevant buildings like ports on grain hexes. You would usually want to farm here anyway. So that's a very easy thing to delete, and that will make it easier for the enemy to not raid you as well. If you get rid of any of these unnecessary ports and make sure you're only keeping the ones that are fortified. You start out with some weird financial situations over here anyway. Like in one province here, we have these 2 different forts. I'm going to get rid of this one. It's excessive. It's going to surpass our fort infrastructure capacity if we keep that. And I'm going to get rid of all of these extra ports as well, which gives me even more initial spending money. And you can do this with other things. Like up here, is this fort really necessary? No. And are you going to build the capital of this location like a city on a mountain pass that grows vegetables? Probably not. You can get rid of that as well. That's even more money. And defending over here isn't really going to be too important as far as this war goes either. There are many other little things you could be doing potentially as well, like maybe building up a 2nd level of fort over here on your capital, and a 3rd if you get rid of some of the things that are built there, especially down here. Wow, where would another fort be helpful? Maybe right on the damn front line. It's up to you how much of this you want to do, because you won't even have time to finish a single fort before all of this is done. So you're gonna have to really be smart with it. I mean, even look over here to the east. We have more of this nonsense. We have 2 different forts right next to each other. Just keep the ones on whatever you decide your capital to be, and you'll have even more spending money. It will get even easier. And then as you have all this money, you're going to want to plan. Now, you're going to want to plan before the AI can really get anything going. Mercs could be very useful to you in this war. Anything you get is going to be permanently claimed for yourself. And looking at this, all the blue here and all the green spread around, this is what you're going to be fighting over. And so if you can actually take as much of this as possible and win as many fights as possible, then you will come out of this war really, really all right. We got this 13.5k right here. We got another 11k on our capital. These are very good options, as we can see. Some of the best options in our vicinity. Oh, the best options in our vicinity over here. And look at how much the strongest ones cost here. 10.12 every single month. 100 cost to buy them. If we did go ahead and we purchased this, for example, we would have this pretty good army where we're going to want the heavy infantry on the front. We're gonna want those light cav on the side. I'm gonna lower that flank size so we don't have a lot of light cav. And archers in the back here, which would work pretty well with, it seems, a bottleneck, which is a good opposite to our shock action, meaning they would actually work pretty well in conjunction with our troops here. The marshal on this merc isn't too amazing. The marshal on the 11k here right now is way better, so it's up to you which one you actually really want to get. With an 8.31 cost, you'd be spending less money overall and might have money to afford another different mercenary group with higher martial than this leader, and that is important to consider. And then, just so you know, if you don't already know, make sure to, especially if you start pulling these guys up late, use the unit reorganization here. Turn that on. It'll cost more for a short period of time. It'll get your morale up much, much faster. I would definitely suggest that for getting ready for this war, which, as you see, look at the time here. It is already about to proc again. And here it is, Antigonid sails. We cannot defer war forever. We'll get a massive stability bonus for going into this war. The war started. You'll see, you would have really had to start this process from the beginning. These mercenaries here, if you really wanted them to be fully ready, but this is where you'd also want to go ahead and raise your levies, pretty much all levies, including this one over here, and just use what I taught you. You'll have to like redo this every time something gets pulled up, but just reuse that kind of setup if you liked that setup that I showed you. And then you don't always need to assign it to these small levies. Depends on what you have them going along with, if you have them attached to anything or not. Definitely a small flank size. Heavy cav, we don't even have light cav here. Heavy infantry, light infantry, there you go. Let's say I wanted to have these guys kind of go along with the mercenaries. Then maybe I'd send them over to the mercenaries, get these levies moving down here. This is going to be my front early on at the beginning here. Thankfully, it's all pretty much connected. So the full force of the Antigonids coming at me is now going to have to fight, potentially, depending on how you choose to go about this, roughly 30 plus K of men with good leaders, not as good leaders as we can see here, but good leaders. And if we can win this fight here, we can take all of this for ourselves while defending Corinthos right here, and then even go into these islands, which do connect by land, a lot of them. If you do choose to keep that navy and you hide it and then wait until the Antigonids aren't looking, you could potentially use it to help you island hop a little bit. But you could also go for the biggest prize here. Look at everything that's red over here now. It's very easy to just go to your neighbors and ask for military access. And basically everybody in this game always says yes to military access. And there's not exactly a limit to how many of these you can have. So I can just easily get military access with as many of these nations as I want. And now I would have a path to go right into the Antigonid kingdom to get as much stuff from them as I want. Same thing goes down here, by the way. If I go over to, well, Boethia is one rare instance where they are planning my demise, so they won't give me anything. So that is unfortunate. But it's also still irrelevant, because if I really wanted to, I could still find a way to do this by just going literally around and asking everybody else until I find a path over to Corinthos or wherever I want to be, as you can see. Unlike most other wars, just know this war is on a sort of historical time limit, the time limit being roughly around the time the leader of the Antigonids dies, and he starts out 78 years old. So you're going to be on a rush. The first priority will be to defend your territory. The second priority will be to, as I showed you, find your way to enemy territory and then take it. Whether you want to go with a more expensive naval route or a more maybe tedious asking for military access route. Maybe bribing someone that won't give you military access a little bit of money. It's really up to you. And taking as much as possible, getting as much, and maintaining your aggressive expansion. Don't get too crazy with it. No matter what, if you survive this war, and that's really Macedon's goal at the end of this war, is surviving it, you will be given a nice chunk of land in the Antigonid kingdom. You'll be able to keep everything that you took otherwise as well, and you will come out much stronger as a result. You could get to rebuilding that legion if you want, and building up your nation, and then sending out Macedon as you want. Or, if you don't want to deal with all this, you could, as I showed you earlier, just give them Corinthos. it's not that important anyway in the grand scheme of things. Go attack Thrace instead. That's an even better option. Something I did in a recent PvP that I did. I just completely prevented this war by handing off Corinthos, and then I invaded Thrace with the legacy of Alexander Wargal, and I came out so powerful, you really can't compete with it, with what you're going to get from this war if you do go through with this. So that would be like my personal min-max suggestion, separate to just giving up Corinthos if you're new, separate to how to handle this war if you really want to go through with it. These are, in my eyes, the best 3 paths for you to take as Macedon in the early game. Which one you take is up to you, but I hope this video has been helpful to you. I hope you have been enlightened on how to solve Macedon's early game woes, which I see so many new players fall prey to. I plan on making guides on how to get started with a couple other nations. Feel free to request some in the comments below. Also, this is part of a playlist of guides. Feel free to check those out in the description below, and let me know if you want to see any other guides that I haven't covered yet in the comments. For now, though, thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope to see you on another one.